Great. Several years ago, I was at a Trappist monastery. Trappists are monks that have taken a vow of silence for a week-long silent retreat. It's a Trappist monastery. They've taken a vow of silence, so my retreat is not going to be a loud one. This was at the Abbey of Gethsemane out in rural Kentucky. Some of you may know that Gethsemane was the longtime home of the Trappist monk Thomas Merton, uh, great spiritual writer who has really, made a significant impact in my life. Um, I had just graduated from seminary, and I had planned this week long retreat. I don't know if you've ever had that weird, unique chance to spend a week living in a monastery with monks, but the most significant thing that happens when you kind of enter into that life for even a couple of days, honestly, even just a day, is how quickly their rhythms also become your rhythms. The most significant example of this is fixed prayer. That is kind of praying at specific times in the day. This is an ancient spiritual practice that contemporary evangelical Christianity, like our version of Christianity, has often left behind. You know, Praying at specific points in the day for most of human history was one of the things that bound all of the major religious traditions together. Even when you think about Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they all share this great tradition of praying at specific points in the day. The New Testament, for example, always refers to these specific hours of praying. Pentecost, for example, happened at the third hour of prayer. Peter had this vision of clean and unclean foods at the sixth hour. And later, him and a guy named John healed a man outside a temple where they had gathered to pray their ninth, I think it was their ninth hour prayers. Praying at specific points in the day has often been one of the rhythms of the religious faithful. And in my day to day life, that's not really how I live my day. But when you're in a monastery, and their rhythm becomes your rhythm, it quickly starts to stand out to you how prominent those kind of check marks are throughout a day. The fixed hours of prayer go like this. There's something called matins, which is before dawn. Imagine the moment that your kind of alarm goes off, and the very first time, and the sun hasn't risen yet. There's lauds, which is kind of at the moment of dawn. There's prime, which is the first prime full hour of daylight. And then there's another prayer at 9 a.m. We're only at 9 a.m., right? There's four prayers already. Then another prayer at noon, another prayer at 3 p.m., vespers at 6 p.m., Compline, a service that you might be familiar with, Compline at 7 p.m., or traditionally the rhythm for Compline is right before you retire for the night, right before you end your day. And then the last prayer is something called vigil, which, to be clear, is after you had already retired for the night, like after you had already gone to bed. Vigil usually happens around 3 a.m. And it's a vigil that has often caught my attention. I can still remember being at the Abbey of Gethsemane in Kentucky and hearing those quiet shuffling of monks' feet kind of moving through the hallway as they make their way to the chapel for the 3 a.m. vigil prayers. And while admittedly, for the first several days of my retreat, I slept through the vigil prayer, on one day, I set an alarm, I went to sleep, and then I woke up 2:50 a.m. so that I could pray for just a few minutes at 3 a.m. Why? Because when days start to blend into one another, which I would imagine at a monastery when that's your life, that can happen pretty easily. And when you're in a pandemic and everything often feels the same. It can happen pretty easily. When everything starts to feel the same, and when your life and your spirituality and your mind and your heart start to sound like white noise, vigil is an invitation to wake up, to awaken. And not just to awaken, but to awaken with a belief that something worthwhile is about to happen. From Latin, the word vigil literally means watchfulness. Literally, this is a time to look, a time to be awake, a time to be here, a time to notice what is around you, a time to notice even yourself. Several weeks ago, we hosted the Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is a vigil that we hold for the too many transgender people who have been murdered every year. That's a vigil of people gathering together. Christmas Eve is also often referred to as a vigil. Yeah, we have our days and our rhythms, and then at this strange point in the evening, we all gather together. Now, these may not be at 3 a.m., but they're still gatherings of people who want to be awake. We want to be aware of what's going on around us, of what's going on within us. They are gatherings of people who want to become awakened to something important. One of the central themes of Advent has always been awakefulness, you know, being aware. The word Advent literally means like arrival. Something is happening. The question is, will you be awake for it? Will you see it? The Gospel of John uses those images of blind and seeing, eyes closed and eyes open, over and over and over again to tell the Christ story. One of the lectionary texts that's assigned to the season of Advent, Mark chapter 13, which was last week's Advent reading, goes like this. Let me read this for you. This is Mark chapter 13. Let me pull it up on my computer real quick. So, Mark 13, I'm going to start with verse 24. It goes like this. But in those days, following distress, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and stars will fall from the sky. Bodies will be shaken. And at that time, people will see the human one. This is referring to the Christ, coming surrounded with clouds and great power and glory. And he will send his angels and gather his people from the four winds and from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only God the Creator. So be on guard, be alert. You do not know what time the human one will come. It's like a man going away and he leaves his house and puts his servants in charge, each with their assigned task, and tells the one at the door, keep watch. Therefore, be alert, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or at midnight or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. Yeah, that's the Advent reading. I don't like the use of that word alert there. In Greek, the word is igiro. It's a cool sounding word, igiro, but it doesn't mean be alert. It means I awaken. Alertness, I think in today's day and age, especially, kind of conjures up this image of like being on guard. Like I think about this idea of like a soldier almost, like standing at a watchtower, like looking, being alert. And in our digital era, when I think about alerts, I think about like a pinging notification on my smartphone giving me an alert, alert, all these pop ups. I'm not quite sure that that's the intention of this story. Unfortunately, I think when we read it now, we read it through that lens of like, the Christ is coming, so be on guard, almost be like militaristic about it. Make sure that people are ready. But the story really changes when Igiro isn't alert, alert, danger, danger, but is instead wake up. Or even more than that, literally way the word reads, it's a declaration from you to say, I awaken. It's as if the story is saying the Christ is being born among you all over at any time. Are you going to wake up? You know, one of the things that I find so interesting about that idea of awakening instead of just being alert is that awakening kind of implies that you're awaking from a certain state. Obviously, for most of us, the state that we're awaking from is sleep. Remember the reading. Do not let him find you sleeping. But this isn't just like a literal sleep, is it? You know, think about the last month. Think about the last 8 months. Think about this year. Where in your life do you feel like maybe you've fallen asleep a little bit? Don't get me wrong, sleep is essential. We can't function without sleep. We can push it a little bit. We can get to the limits of our ability to stay awake and alert and to process everything, but we do need to take a step back and we do need sleep. But too much sleep, constant sleep, constant sleep can make it really hard to ever get out of. Just- It's like a trap. And so when you think about the last year, which has been a difficult year, is there an area where maybe you started to sleep, whether unexpectedly or your own intention, but you're finding it hard to come out of? Uh, where have you checked out a little bit? Or let me just simply phrase it like this: where in your day-to-day rhythms are you feeling a bit of white noise, like you gone to sleep a bit? You know, as we enter into this Advent season, a season awaiting something new, what do you want to awaken to? Remember the word igiro, I awaken. Again, I love this notion that the fixed prayer of vigil, remember from the fixed hours, happens after people have already fallen asleep. So the question here is quite literal. Do you even want to wake up? I remember myself at the Abbey of Gethsemane for several days intentionally saying, no, not today. I'm not going to awaken for the vigil prayer, not setting my alarm for 2:50 a.m. But then there are other days, other seasons where the need to awaken, to not be asleep, is much more strongly felt. And I don't know about you, but that is how I'm feeling in this Advent season. As if for a while I have been asleep, even out of necessity. But I'd like to awaken, at least awaken to some things today. So I'm going to actually invite you to hold this as a spiritual practice for our next few weeks of Advent. I know it seems incredibly simple, but grab a piece of paper. I have a little post it note here. Grab a pen and write down this simple phrase: May I awaken to. And then you fill out the rest. What is it in your life that maybe you would like to awaken to? Would you like to awaken to the injustice of 47 transgender people being murdered this year? Would you like to awaken to the radical food insecurity that so many people are struggling with in this winter season? Would you like to awaken to the divisive patriarchy of our current political system and be a part of a change that makes things better for all people? Would you like to awaken to creativity? Would you like to awaken to cleaning your house? Would you like to awaken to being grateful for the relationships and connections we have with family and friends, even if it's still virtual? Would you like to awaken to just who you are this Advent season? Again, the point is that this is Advent, the time of arrival and expectation and awaiting something new to happen. That's not the question whether or not Advent will come. Advent's on its way. The question, my friends, is whether or not you will wake up. So may you, Igiro, awaken as we continue in this Advent season.